So Flora from Supply Compass, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today for our 5th Fashion Means Business Fashion Talk. Really appreciate your involvement. This talk's been hugely successful, so thank you very much for giving up your time and for being here today. So I'm going to hand over to yourself.
Brilliant.
Introduce yourself, and yeah, I will be here in the background. I'm going to turn off my camera and my microphone, but yeah, and we've also got Jackie in the room to help as well. So thank you very much for coming today. Really great to have you here. Thank you.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. I'm just putting my video on now so that you can see my face now, and I'm going to turn it off just for the presentation, and I'll turn it back on again for questions just so you can see my face. So bye on the video there. Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you all those who have joined. Just a really brief introduction to who I am, and then later in this presentation I will tell you a bit more about Supply Compass. So I am one of the co-founders of Supply Compass, and we set up the business just under 4 years ago. And really since the beginning I've been passionate about changing how production happens for not just brands but also the manufacturers of the future. And for that, really for me, it looks like a combination of better technology, better relationships, and a way of working that is better for people and the planet. So just to start off, to kind of get a bit of context, you know, I won't necessarily be saying anything too new in this slide, but really the brands of today have to deliver exceptional results across the board. Not only, you know, starting with, you know, delivering fresh products, you've got to be reactive to customers' needs, unique, innovative materials, you've got to be fast, you've got to respond to trends, fast lead times, collections immediately available. On top of this, you can't compromise the quality of the product. They've got to be designed to last, but also an affordable price point. And the key thing here increasingly is sustainability and transparency and ethical working practices. So these are all important aspects of being a modern brand. But if we just go on to the next slide, the tools that exist to do this are not built for the future of fashion and supply chains. The old systems, that legacy processes and systems tend to be relatively manual and offline. There's relatively little real-time collaboration. So what I mean by that is that for brands, you make a comment in, you know, you make a comment on one of your tech packs, it's then picked up by someone else a day later in an email, and we need this immediacy and reaction, the quick reaction to changes and comments. It's pretty fragmented, as you can see in this little illustration here. You know, there's a lot of things happening off kind of little siloed nodules that don't talk to each other. What's happening in the design process with a design team may not be communicated to the relevant person in the factory at the right time, or even just across teams within one organization, it's very siloed. So with there's it's kind of this linear process where things can't necessarily be happening all at the same time, and that's really key for efficiency and better collaboration. And then on top of this, you kind of place the importance of being more sustainable, and really at the heart of sustainability is data and technology and better processes. And these old ways of working really are not fit for the future. So really, you know, what I'm just showing here is also how much time and stress and money could be saved. It really costs a lot to manage production in current ways. Brands, particularly in light of what's happened over the last few months, and I will touch on that in a bit. Brands need to be leaner and efficient to save costs, and that does not mean pushing down the cost. In fact, that needs to go up, but it means finding efficiencies elsewhere. So brands need to be doing all of that I showed you on that first page, but they need to be doing it with smaller teams and spending less. teams are slaves to email in production. When I ask, so we work very closely with lots of different fashion brands of different sizes, and when I ask them their challenges, it's often, I spend my life on email. I spend my life trawling through email, looking for that email I sent that factory approving something. And so really, you know, email, Excel, there are avoidable errors, missed PDFs, missed attachments, WhatsApp approvals. It can be really quite a nightmare. And you know, brands are stressed. It's a stressful time, and factories are frustrated. So really, it is a time for change. So I just want to kind of rewind a little bit of how do we get to this point, that these processes have come to be the norm, and teams are finding it so hard. So if I just rewind back to the 70s and 80s, production lead times, production was slow. Design cycles were much slower. You often had 2 seasons a year. Outsourcing started to begin, and what would happen is that design teams would travel and spend sometimes up to a month in a factory designing kind of collaboratively with the factory design team themselves. And then there was little conversation in between. You'd make your approval and then you'd wait for your goods to arrive. Then the 90s and noughties happened, and everything got faster and cheaper. There were more collections needed. The arrival of the internet meant that you could manage production over email, and really teams started to manage production from afar. There was less visiting of factories, and then towards the end of that was the 2008 crash, and it started to be a challenging time. And so by the early 2010s, the cracks in the model really started to appear. Supply chains are under strain. Relationships have become increasingly transactional, which is something that I'll touch on later, which is a really key part of the future of the fashion industry and supply chains, is the moving away from the transactional. Lead times were shorter, the need to be faster, the need for flexibility. Then the Rana Plaza disaster happened, and there was increasingly, it was compulsory to have this transparency over not just your tier 1, but your tier 2 suppliers and beyond. Climate emergency became very real, particularly in the last few years. And yet, whilst this is happening, costs are still being driven down. Then big question mark, COVID happened. So we've been really living through this over the last 3 months, spending a lot of time talking to our brands and our factory owners over video calls, what calls. You know, I don't need to tell anyone this. The industry has obviously never experienced anything like this. An industry that was already in some parts at breaking point. And really, what's happened here is that no one has been left unaffected. What really COVID showed is the power imbalance between brands and manufacturers. Brands, you know, you've seen the headlines cancelling orders, and the reality is it's the poorest who were worst affected. The scramble to sell overstock in excess, there's crazy sales going on right now. It's a really, really tricky time for everyone involved, and certain categories have been particularly badly impacted, as has the high street. But I don't want this focus to be doom and gloom in this session. I really do believe that COVID-19 is the catalyst, can be a positive catalyst for systemic change. There is a huge once-in-a-lifetime opportunity really to rethink the fashion system and rebuild it together, really into one that works for people and planet and not just profit. And something that we've really noticed as the last couple of months has been actually a time of reflection for lots of fashion brands. People have slowed down. When we would sometimes, brands would say to us, sorry, I haven't got the time to speak, I'm so busy. Taking the time to really talk through their problems with us, and listen, really taking a step back, taking stock of what had happened and how we got to this point, and spending this time learning, and rethinking, because you get into your job in a fashion brand and it is so fast paced. It is stressful. There's collections dropping all the time. But really what I've sensed in this period, regardless of, obviously it's a tough time financially and beyond, and there's a lot of uncertainty, there is a feeling of optimism, and an openness to change that I didn't feel was there enough to really make radical change happen. So I'm hopeful also from a kind of new business perspective, from new brands that are born, that those born in this post-COVID world will be building new business models and have a new resilience about them, and sustainability being really integrated into this rebuild. It's still early days. It's still, hard to see how, what that really looks like. But I think the thing that we sensed over the last 3 or 4 years was that what our biggest barrier to changing the way that the supply chain operated and the mindsets of people was really people's openness. And there was often this feeling of, well, this is how we've always done it and we're not going to change it. Why would we be the ones who changed it? And now what we're seeing is every single brand out there coming out saying, right, we want to change, and it's coming top down and bottom up in organizations. We've seen behavioral change happen overnight. Brands who said, look, we have to do everything in person. We have to design our collections, do all of our sampling approvals together in the office overnight, had to do all of this over Zoom, and forcing of using digital tools and having to find new efficiencies and having to collaborate virtually was something that we've been talking about for years, and the change was slow to happen, and then overnight that happens. So really we see technology and digital transformation to be at the core of this thinking of the fashion system. And it really is about collaboration and bringing loads of minds together, because no one person has the answer. And that's again a positive thing that we are seeing from fashion brands, is that this and manufacturers, is this openness to be transparent and collaborative within the industry. So really just to kind of go back to the core of how things have been and where they need to get to. So from a supplier network point of view, often many brands manage their supply chains in quite an informal way. Often it's just in an Excel list on a desktop, or in someone's mind it's a relationship that someone has got from somewhere, and that's fine how you find your manufacturers, but it's hard to access, and that person leaves that organization, they take that relationship with them. Product development. So when I talk about product development, I mean the designing of tech packs and getting through to your sampling process. This is a slow and time-consuming and often very costly and wasteful process. And this really is a core part of what we're focused on as an organisation, is the product development process, where we think you can shave a lot of time and cost and design better in that process. So materials, again, the access to materials, particularly in this time, there's no possibility to go and visit trade shows around the world to feel new materials. The need for this instant access to new materials is really important right now. Gets into production management, again, like product development. This is relatively manual and offline. Most of the processes we see in businesses of all sizes is, even if they've got a PLM software, there's still a hell of a lot of email and Excel used, and it's not necessarily updated in real time. And the key thing is production management needs to be done in collaboration with your factories, and none of these tools and softwares are a kind of two-way collaboration then. Sustainability, to date has been this challenging addition that lots of businesses find hard to fit in. The speed to market, looking at average time from design to delivery of about 6 months, which is too slow for if you need to be a demand-driven organisation, which is what the future looks like. You do not want to be stuck with loads of stock that can't sell. And then unavoidable sunk costs. So going from that to this, so just to give you an overview of really what the future looks like, this is what brands need, this is what manufacturers will be evolving into, this is really the future. So from a supplier network perspective, and I think this has been really apparent in these times, the need to be able to find new factories. We see brands who suddenly need to be able to launch new collections and new categories. Finding those online, Google is not the place to find new partners. And so this is something that I'll talk a bit about, is how we've built our kind of on-demand network, as you will, a little bit like you plug into Netflix, you get your films on demand, you pay for what you need. The same thing is necessary in with your supplier network, interconnected, agile, and on demand. So even the other important aspect is that your network is also speaking to each other. Product development, this again is back to kind of demand driven, fast, and exploring tools like 3D. It may be that you only have one physical sample of your product, right, your pre-production sample before to approve, and up until then it could be a fully virtual sample. This is something that we're really excited about as a business and exploring. From a material perspective, it goes back to the supplier network and having this instant access to the best materials. And when we say best, obviously that comes, we look at the kind of environmental impact of those materials, the location, making sure you're sourcing close to source, finding the right materials. Things like dead stock is something that we really are exploring as a business. Production management, this is really the core of where so much goes wrong, and where some of the challenges really are, is the efficiency of production management. And it needing to be collaborative and in real time and accessible in a cloud, not on someone's desktop or on a piece of paper in an office. Who knows if that right person's going to be in the office for the day that you need it. And then from a sustainability perspective, and this is something again I'll touch on, and what we focus on is bringing sustainability as standard and not making it this challenging add-on. And again, that technology plays a huge role in this, so that it's part of a process, and that every single person in an organization is thinking about it and doing it, not just the sustainability team, because it needs to be lived and breathed by all. And then speed to market, looking at ways to really kind of make that whole process so much faster, and not just talking the production process. There is a set amount of time it takes to make a product, but the lead up to that, which is what we're really excited about, making faster, is looking at dead stock materials that could be available tomorrow. You shave off 6 weeks lead time for your fabrics to be there. Thinking about making your 3D samples, you don't have to wait 2 weeks for a sample to arrive. You can design and do your iteration process in a couple of days. So for us, that's what speed looks like there. And then newfound cost efficiencies in terms of across the team by using digital softwares. So really, we believe that digitalisation is the answer. We're not alone in this. There's lots of really exciting innovations happening within our space, and really what our focus as a business is, we're building that kind of digital core that from which design, development, sampling and team collaboration with your factory can happen. Single source of truth is so important, so there's no old revisions being sent to a factory. The smart and sustainable sourcing, making sure you're choosing the right materials and designing for sustainability from the start. Real-time collaboration, this has happened in lots of other industries, and fashion's been a bit slower to pick up the need for kind of great project management software, essentially. And an interconnected network. So just moving on to the next slide. Introducing Supply Compass. So just a little bit of background. This is me and Gus here, so he's my co-founder, and this is our wonderful team. We are, I think, 19 of us. That's actually not everyone in there. And we started it, just Gus and I, 4 years ago, but have a team of amazing individuals who are as passionate, if not more, than we are about changing the way that production and everything within the supply chain happens. Really from the start, it's the same. The mission has been the same, to reimagine and redesign how brands and manufacturers find each other and work together, using technology to place sustainability and efficiency at the core. And our focus really is around the kind of product development and production management side of things. It's often like the unsexy part of the supply chain that people kind of push to the side. We don't think so. We think it's incredibly exciting. And that's a part of our role as a business, is to get people excited about this part and see huge potential to innovate. So yeah, that's kind of a bit of an intro to us. We're based in London, well, at the moment, fully remotely, all over the place, and in India, in Delhi and Hyderabad. So we, from the beginning, have been a Indian and UK company. And just to kind of give you a little overview of how we got here, here's a collection of photos from the early days for me and Gus, just to kind of take you through our startup journey. We're still a startup. Often I felt people weren't honest enough about how hard it is to build a business from the beginnings, and I think particularly in an industry which has a lot of old legacy systems in place. But we knew from the beginning, I mean, my passion and dedication to changing this part of the industry has unway, but if not, I've probably got more passionate about it. But the first 2 years, Gus and I actually moved to India and lived in Mumbai, and really felt like to bring about positive change that works for brands as well as manufacturers, we need to live and breathe supply chain. So we really spent most of 2 years inside factories. We visited over, I think it was 250, 300 manufacturers, suppliers, tanneries. Every single factory we went to, we would see a new machine, we'd meet a new inspiring person running it, and we learned so much. And I think what was really important for us in that time was, it's so easy to get kind of swept up in the challenges of the fashion sector from the brand side, but really to transform this industry, it has to be done in collaboration with manufacturers and every single player in the supply chain. And so I think what was really inspiring and insightful for us is we would go to these factories. I think they couldn't work out who we were to begin with. They were like, hold on a second, so you're not a brand, you're not a buyer, and you're not an inspection agency. And we'd be like, no, we just are here to build relationships and see if you want to be on board for this new way of working. And lots of them know, you know what, it's not for us, we like the old way. Some of those people have actually come back since they realised that the world has changed and they need to be thinking innovatively. But I think what was really interesting was hearing the same challenges that brands were having, but repeated in a different way. And I think what we realized is that both sides are wanting to get to the same place, but the tools and methods of working just don't make it easy. And it's a stressful process where so much for factories, so much frustration, so little standardization, lacking of the right information. So really we position our business very much at the center of the brand and manufacturer relationship. And it's so important to involve manufacturers in the innovation journey, as their involvement is really key to that transformation. So just to give a quick overview of our business, so we are not just our platform, we also have our network and services. So our platform will just show you some of the core features of what we do and why we built them. But our network, so we have over 250 partners in our network, but we work very closely. Our core partners are about 50, and we work with not just tier 1 manufacturers, but tier 2, tier 3 suppliers as well. Across, really our focus is the fashion and homeware space, particularly fashion. And we do a lot in organic cotton, India being one of our main focus countries to operate in, but we also work in Portugal and a few other countries as well. So you use our platform, and then you get access to our network and our amazing team of production experts who have extensive experience working with brands, but also, and the important part, is working inside factories. So most of them have actually spent at least a couple of years managing production within a factory in Nepal, in India, Cambodia, a whole mixture. And that's really, really important. To make the change, because you have to understand both sides, because it's not as simple as, well, this person said this and it's easy for that person to do that. So just a quick overview of our platform. So our product development and production management software, we launched our new version of it in February, and we are always adding and building and really have just been building around the brands, the 40 plus brands that we've worked with today, and our factories as well. So brands have a login and manufacturers have their own login. I'm just going to show you the brand side in these slides. So really what we kind of, a lot of it is quite visual and easy annotation. We've taken inspiration from the consumer space. We felt that so many solutions that have been built for the B2B industry had failed to take into consideration that the end user is generally a creative individual and wants a nice experience. And so that's something that's really important to us, that it doesn't become a chore to design your collection. It should be a delightful experience as much as possible. So you can upload images, collaborate in real time, you annotate and share across your team. Here's an example of our mood board we launched a month back. Instant access to supply chain, so you design your collections and then you submit your collections for costings, and then you get matched if you work with one of our manufacturers, or you can invite your own factories in your own supply network to join, and you get matched and look through their profile and see their certifications. And this is something that as a business we're really focusing on expanding more and more over the next few years, is increasing traceability across right back to tier 4 suppliers through our system. It takes time, and our goal for the end of year is 100% traceability for tier 1, tier 2 suppliers. and enabling them to sign up to our platform and create profiles and input core information. So we have an onboarding assessment tool, and we take our factories who we work with, we go through a 3 to 6 month onboarding process, which has we do a telephone call, we then send an initial questionnaire assessment, and then we visit, we film, and then we can do continuous assessment. So that's just to give you an update on how we manage our own network. But the ultimate goal is for our platform to be able to be by any brand of any size anywhere in the world. So this next page is the Techpack. So Techpack is an interesting one. We hear, I often ask brands, like, what does a Techpack mean to you? It means and looks different to every single brand out there, and that was the crux of the problem that we saw when visiting factories. We would say, what does a good Techpack look like to you? And our factories would be like, no one's ever asked us what a good Techpack looks like. We just receive Techpacks. But now you're asking, okay, well, it's actually really annoying when this isn't in there. Oh, well, brands often miss out this, this, and this. And so what we've done is designed a Techpack around what designers want and like the feel of, but also what manufacturers need. And it really brings it, on an initial point is our Techpacks seem relatively simple, but what's quite exciting about them is that they become these smart Techpacks. As open they evolve, you make approvals, cards get signed off, your measurements all tracked in there, and you can drop material cards, component cards, etc. in from our library. So really the core of what our platform is built upon libraries, so that you can manage every material you've ever worked with, and it will have your supplier link to that and all of the relevant information. So it's storing all this data in one place, which in turn makes the sustainability element much easier to measure when it comes out the other side. And what's really key is what I'm showing you here is that manufacturers are interacting with every part of this. You don't send over email. They are receiving these updates in real time, and they can be on the production floor, receive an update, it's relevant, they're getting it at the right time, and you can manage orders this way. And then for us, the most complex part of the process that we've seen few platforms manage to solve, and few people who've actually got the process right in this area, is sampling and approvals. So where our Techpacks become quite exciting is that you design your Techpacks for our system, and then every card in that Techpack has a cell, and then that cell goes on its own journey. You request your sample of that exact material, you then go through approvals, you and your team can comment, give feedback, and submit the approval to the factory, and it's all just managed in one place on the platform. So there's no kind of information in lots of areas. So just to tell you a bit about our core focus when it comes to sustainability, for us at the start, it's always about the right partnerships, building the right network. It's hard to do any of the other things unless you've got the right people to be doing it with. And that's what we really, really look for when we're looking for new manufacturers, is a mindset, is a shared values to Supply Compass. We want them to be strategic partners, forward-looking, obviously fair, inclusive, and equal is key. And then when you go beyond the network, so building upon that, we often take brands on this journey, right? We'll set you up with the right supply chains. Then let's look at design. So obviously there's the material components and packaging part of it, but also looking to build quality products. We don't work in fast fashion, cheap product. We deal with quality, designed to last, not excess quantities, and the flexibility and ability to test the market. And then the final key part of sustainability, which is often the bit that gets forgotten, and people focus on the low-hanging fruit of materials and compliance, but actually really process. And this is something we're really passionate about. And sustainability is essentially about waste a lot of the time, and efficiencies. So what this platform really does is puts data at the core, so you can make informed decisions. How how many samples you're ordering each season, how many styles, so it's really just tracking. That you had this many couriers, your goods came from this place, all in one place, so that you can really, there's no excuses, you've got full visibility over what's happening where, and then you can start to improve. But unless you have data and a good process, then it's really hard to make real impact. And then just before we go into the questions, I just wanted to say that obviously I've talked a lot about technology here. But the future is not just about technology for supply chains. It's really about people. Human relationships are as critical as the technology themselves. And really, what our aim is to bring technology in where it is needed and to free people up, teams up, to spend time building relationships. Really, your supply chain is your, or the entirety of your supply chain as a fashion brand is your kind of strategic advantage, and they should be seen as an extension of your own team and treated as such, and really see them as kind of partners for collaboration and moving away from the transactional. So that's it for the present now. I've got some nice questions that were submitted before, and it leaves good time to answer other questions.
Flora, thank you very much. Some really, sort of poignant points that you picked up on then, really fascinating. Obviously, we've been chatting over the past few months, and I think your journeys, the fact you spent time over in India and really tried to understand what was going on within the factories and within the supply chain. Quite interesting that, when you asked the factories, what did they want from a Techpack, it was actually the first time they'd ever been asked that question. So yeah, some sort of valuable insights into perhaps some of the sort of challenges or some of the sort of gaps that we find within the supply chain. So yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, so we've got a number of questions. The chat box is now open as well, so if anyone would like to post any questions in the chat box, then please do, and we'll try and answer all questions posed. But just a question that was asked ahead of the session. So at the start, you spoke about what you do as a business, and you spoke about some of these changes might come with an increased unit cost. One of the questions that's come in is the changes that you discuss in the supply chain. How can they increase revenue and lower the cost, I suppose?
So I think it's a really good question. I think, for us, some of the biggest savings really come from quite simple changes. And so it's not, as I said, it's not about pushing back on unit costs, but it's about finding efficiencies in process. And in order to do that, it's first about measuring and placing data at the heart. So for me, some of the key areas are obviously by using a software, you can save a huge amount of time. When we look at how many emails are sent, I think on average there's I can't remember how many stars it was across, but 30,000 emails sent on a collection across a period of time, and removing this being a slave to email really saves time, and in turn you don't need to build such a huge team to manage production, and that's what we're seeing a lot of executives thinking now is like we simply can't have 30% of our workforce managing production when we've got this many styles. And so being thinking more strategically there. But I think that there's in line with that, there's this need for kind of better communication. So when I talk about better communication, it's really simple. It's stuff that's happened, the arrival of Slack, driving efficiencies there from a communication perspective, but it needs to be structured within the supply chain. So what good communication and standardization of process reduces the likelihood of things going wrong. So if you do a good Techpack and things are structured and standardized and you communicate it in the right way to your factory, you're much more likely to get the right sample right first time and save costs and save back and forth. So a lot of it is that really is standardization and structure and good set process really. Oh, I think you're on mute.
I put it on mute because we've actually got thunder here, so it's thunder and lightning outside.
Oh, I see.
So just actually, whilst you're answering that question, thank you. We've had a question in from someone from India actually asking how can they to work with you, Supply Compass?
Just reach out. So you can sign up on our platform, and then what you do is you then speak to me and my team. We'll go through that process and see if there's that alignment of business value and also fit with our product categories. But we respond to every manufacturer request that comes through. Sometimes we may be a bit slower because we have a lot coming through at the moment. But yeah, sign up and reach out.
Okay, brilliant. And then, yeah, quite an interesting one. How is sustainable fashion possible when everything from the design development to production of clothes is so fast? Would you equate slow fashion to sustainable fashion?
Really good question. I think I'm going to say it's a complex issue, and it's a complex kind of thing to say yes or no, or black or white. I think slow fashion doesn't inherently mean it's sustainable. You can have slow, unsustainable, unethical fashion. I think that really the speed, the speed to deliver your goods in terms of like that design development process, that needs to be faster, and that doesn't mean it's unsustainable. I think it's all about making sure that you're designing the right thing with the right materials for your customers. So a lot of the issues from unsustainability is just chucking out loads of garments that you have no idea who customers are going to like, discount everything at the end of the season. So I think it is being reactive, and that is fast in its sense, but I suppose reactive is better than fast as a term, I would say.
Yeah, the challenges of fast fashion.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a quite an interesting question actually. Do all your suppliers need to opt in for this to work? So do you ever have a situation where maybe the supply chain includes some of those suppliers? So you spoke about clear transparency for tier 1 and tier 2 factories.
Yeah.
But what's the situation if perhaps not all of the factories have opted into Supply Compass and your way of working, or is it a case of them all having opt-in? Just a question here about reference to raw material inventory and kind of really sort of as we get further down the chain.
Yeah, another good question. So I think when it comes to, obviously it's hard for us to, from a, whilst we open up our platform for brands to invite their own manufacturing into the system, ultimately it only works. You have to sign up to the platform in order to become part of the ecosystem. So yes, it does involve every single person in that chain. In order to be tracked, they need to be registered in the system as such. So what this is why we focused on the organic cotton supply chain as a starting point for us for traceability, because we have those direct relationships with certain supply chains right back to the farm. And so what for us at this stage to manage that, it's got to be a direct relationship, or we've got to have visited. As we scale, we will look to different technologies to enable that. And that's when I know someone asked a question about blockchain, but that's when we'll look at technologies to track and trace where it has been and authenticate that.
Yeah, actually, just on that, the question that was asked ahead of the session, which I shared with you. So yeah, is blockchain a sort of suitable solution in digitalizing the supply chain?
It is. I think for us, you need to digitalize the supply chain for blockchain to work, if you know what I mean. It's so much of what the challenges in transforming this industry is behavioral change, and to suddenly introduce blockchain when that it's running before you can walk with some players in our supply chain. Having said that, our organic cotton farm that we visited in November is using blockchain to track the cotton right through to the spinning mill. So for us, it's not a top priority at the moment, because we want to get the basics right. We want to get everyone using one single platform, and then we will start exploring these innovations and see how they work with our system. Fashion supply chains are obviously complex, so it's a harder journey to get there than it is a food supply chain, for example.
Yeah, I think unless you work in the fashion industry, perhaps you don't have a full comprehension of how complex those supply chains really are.
Yeah.
So right at the start, Flora, you spoke about using dead stock, and actually there is a question in here from Matilda which says, how can brands reduce or reuse their waste effectively?
So there's a really cool company in America called Queen of Raw. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they are doing an amazing job at doing dead stock at scale. And you, I think, as a brand and a manufacturer and a supplier, you can sell your dead stock, and then anyone can buy that through there. So I would highly suggest that. In terms of within the supply chain, we also, as a business, are quite focused on looking at where the pre-production waste and also pre-consumer waste is going. And we have one supply chain which is a recycled polyester and recycled cotton supply chain, where the yarn supplier actually collects, so they kind of collect waste across India back to their spinning mill in northern India. They then respin it into yarn and sell it back to the same factories again. So we're looking also at that kind of circularity within the supply chain. But I would check out Queen of Raw.
And just another question. So you've spoken about India, obviously your time in India, and you have a presence within India. Are you looking, or do you do anything with any other countries at the moment? It's a question about China.
So our theory is that, you know, to work and to really be successful in your understanding of a country and how to work from a production standpoint, you need to have experience there, you need to have local understanding, you need to speak the local language. And so for us, as we scale as a business, to go into, we absolutely will explore any big manufacturing country, but we need local speakers. And, you know, obviously me and Gus are not Tamil or Hindi speakers, but our team speak local regional languages, and that's really, really important, because, you know, every country has its uniquenesses and how you communicate. I mean, we're a communication and collaboration software, so you need to understand how that is adapted as per each country. And my previous life, I worked as an innovation consultant, and it was always about how big brands could launch or adapt their messaging or product or business in a certain country, understanding it through a cultural lens. So that's something that has been with me since my start of my career, is that you can't, it's not just a kind of blanket one size fits all. It doesn't work like that. It's intricate.
And just thank you. This is another question about the actual platform that you shared with us. A question about how do you incorporate the physical approval of materials like color swatches, fitting samples, etc.? How does that actually work?
Great. I'm so glad you've asked that question, because this is what we've spent so much of the last 2 years splitting our hairs over, is the physical to digital to physical cycle. So what happened? Oh, someone's put a heart. I love that. What happens is that, so through our system, a brand will request, I can do, if you're interested to know more, I can send you through this detail in an email. But basically, what you request your swatch through that screen with all the color blocks I showed, the factory gets the alert, and then they upload a photo. So they'll go and get that lab kit made. They then upload a photo for approval. This is actually quite an important part, is that you photo approve before you actually get sent the physical thing, just to save, often it's not right and you want to stop it in its tracks. It's quicker and more sustainable not to send and then reject. And what happens is the factory can upload multiple Pantone options. So they often will give 4 different lab dips, upload the 4 options, and then send to you. And then what's great about the system is that every single one of those options, and this is something that we saw happen time and time again, a factory would send option A, B, C, D for your lab dip, and then you'd go, oh, I love this one, and then by the time it's captured in your system with the factory, you're not really sure which the one you actually approved. There's no code. So everything that gets made and sent has a unique code, so it'll be physically sent, and then you as a brand, you go, great, I'm going to approve this one, and it will approve digitally, but it will be exactly what you've got physically as well, if that makes sense.
Brilliant. And then does that tie up with other colors within your collection? So if you've got another red lab dip coming in from another supplier, are you able to sort of tally that if they're sort of using
Good question. I mean, you would be managing it through the same place. So you would be approving your samples. Let's say you requested them at the same time. You would be approving your samples through the same system. If it's a different factory, it would have a different sampling loop and everything like that. But ultimately, you would be comparing physical. But you know, I see what you mean. You kind of want that exact match to each other. Something for us to look into, I'd say.
Yeah, the nightmares of getting a red collection in from one factory and another factory, and them not matching on the shop floor or on your digital page. Yes, I've had that own experience myself. Just a question here about the product footprint and whether or not you can measure the product footprint through its life cycle.
We are looking into this as we speak. So what we've got a kind of huge spreadsheet of everything that we can measure from a product perspective. So from a manufacturer, supplier origin, and then the product itself, we have all of the product information is digitally recorded. So the material, location, the weight, the wash on it, every single part, anything that will happen to that fabric along that journey, and the same with the components and trims will be recorded in the system. And what we're exploring now is how we can then work with, we're looking at a partnership in this space, not building it ourselves, an impact calculator essentially, and we've got all this great information, but turning it into something that brands can then use and put on their websites, or also bench and learn how you work out where to improve and what to focus on. So this is, by the end of this year, we want to have piloted something in this space from a product impact calculator perspective.
And can I ask, this is a question that's come in, does what you do directly link to shipping and ERP, or does it sort of stop once the goods leave the factory? How does that actually?
So through our platform, from a logistics perspective, we have digital freight forwarding. We work with certain digital freight forwarders that's managed through us. So we handle everything up until the warehouse. You can handle it if you want yourself. Some brands have their own logistics networks, but generally people don't want to manage that part of it because it's very stressful as well. So again, for us, it's looking at that seamless end-to-end experience in one platform. So that's where digital freight forwarding partners like Flexport, for example, are brilliant. In terms of ERP system, I mean, there's lots of different integrations that we are exploring with brands. It really depends on the need. A lot of it is actually simple CSV downloads and uploads again, so it's not necessarily a problem. But integrations obviously it will continue to be a very important part of our platform, given the need to plug into different parts, e-commerce sites, etc.
Yeah, the challenges again of the supply chain. Just that came in ahead of the session. So what do you feel is, the focus of these talks is around COVID-19 and you referred to COVID-19 and some of the changes that have been brought about by COVID-19, but what do you believe are the biggest challenges for merchandise managers at the moment, through this sort of supply chain disruption caused by COVID-19?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I've spoken to probably over 300 different brands in the last 3 months, and we always start talking about their challenges in this time. I think that I could probably say the 4 key challenges. Obviously, the number one has been excess stock, and that's not necessarily something that we directly help with. However, we want to enable brands to be more flexible and agile with their MOQs so that this doesn't happen again and more reactive. So excess stock being one. I think finding new factories and new suppliers for new categories. People are looking to experiment with new categories. If they're not doing loungewear, everyone's trying to do loungewear. So I think it's finding new partners from your house. It's who to trust, where to go, and I think that's something that's really hard and needing to be really fast and reactive on it. So I'd say that's number 2. The third is really mapping the supply chain. And we know this is a challenging area and it's not something that can be done overnight. And we've spent a lot of time getting to the point where we're at, and we've got a long way to go as well. But if you don't know, lots of people don't even know who their tier 1 partners are if they're working through an agent and they don't know. And if you don't know where these key, even just the country of where your materials or your trim's coming from, then you do not know where that risk, you don't know how to mitigate or anticipate where that risk where that risk is. And if a second cycle appears of COVID, you need to know where everything is. And then the 4th one, I would say, it's just the new working setup, working from home. We've seen brands adapt really fast to it, but it's challenging, managing approvals, managing sessions over Zoom without necessarily a kind of tool in the middle. And that's probably been the biggest driver of people coming to us over this period is, oh, right, okay, so my process I thought was fine. Excel was working fine for me and having all our swatches in the office. we can't get into the office, and Excel is not, this is not a collaborative document with our factory. So I would say those are the 4 key areas that we're seeing kind of design and production and merchandise teams face.
And I'm not sure if you'd be able to share this information, but there is a question asking which brands do Supply Compass currently work with? Perhaps if you can't give names, could you give an indication of maybe what sort of market level?
So all the brands we work with are on our website. So we are very much working with SMEs in the fashion sector. We don't work with huge multinationals. So we work with lots of brands in the kind of loungewear, casual space. So have a look on our website. I'm really bad at thinking of things off the top of my head. I'm even going to pull the website up so I can remember. But we've been working with House of Sunny. We've been working with so we Flow, which is a kind of loungewear sports kind of sportswear brand. We have been, now you've got, I feel like I can't pull up these names at the top of my head. Oh, you put it, okay, great, thank you. Patch Plants, like that, I've got it up now. Okay, Patch Plants, we do their plant stands. We've worked with Idle Man, Billionaire Boys Club, Ethics, Lux and Hardy, lots of them.
I mean, you did say you just had spent the last few months speaking to 300 odd brands, so I think retaining all that information is quite hard.
I know. I was thinking, who's actually a client and who have we actually just been speaking to, and splitting that too. But I just saw actually someone's question come through saying, is working with multinationals, huge multinationals, your end goal? Our core will be with SMEs. That doesn't mean we won't work with larger businesses, but we really truly believe that the SME market, young, small, independent, agile designers are a huge part of the industry. I think it's something like 99% of fashion brands fall within that part, and we want to build the tools. That huge multinationals have the time, they have the money to go and build these systems themselves. But if you're a team of 30 people, you do not have the time and money. Like we're a startup of 19 of us. You don't always want to go and build these things yourself. You want to tap into something that works. So for us, our heart will always be SMEs, and it's SMEs for factories as well. Our core factories are between kind of 50 and 500 employees as well, and so SMEs on both sides.
Yeah, I think some of the challenges, sort of with working with factories and perhaps sticking with similar size businesses.
And I think, we believe, the SMEs of today could be the multinationals of the future. And if we, where can we as an organization have the most impact? It is at that point. I love getting in with a brand at about 3 or 5 employees, because they scale with the right process, they scale with the right mindset, and it's much harder to change when you're 100 people. You have you're set in your ways. Yeah, I've also seen any new orders orders still being placed. We've actually had our best month yet last month during COVID in terms of new clients sign on and orders placed. I think what's interesting is that we all the brands we work with are generally e-commerce first brands, a lot of them in the casual space, casual loungewear space. Some of them have had a very successful few months, more than usual. Some have had to adapt categories, but no orders were cancelled with us, and that was something that we are pleased to see.
Yeah, very, very proud of, because we've heard a lot about order cancellations since COVID and during COVID.
Yeah.
Probably just have time for one more question. So how do you feel? Do you feel the current situation will allow smaller, independent and sustainable suppliers to rise or to succeed within the market? Need some
totally.
Your question.
I really do, and it kind of goes back to this point. And I think we want to be the competitive advantage for SMEs so they can compete with big organisations. Ultimately, small and medium-sized businesses can be agile and super reactive. If you want to trial something out, if you want to go into 3D sampling, if you want to go into, I don't know, virtual showrooms, you can literally do it in a week, because you just have to get the approval. There's a small team of you can decide to do that. big companies, it has to go through a process, is often, 3 to 6 months. And in this time, those who can adapt the fastest will, as you can trial out and test and see what works and listen to your customers. I think the key is really being close to your customers. What do they want in this time, and building your business around that and experimenting with new business models. But yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, Flora. Really appreciate your time. It's great to hear your view on the supplier retailer sort of relationships. And COVID-19 has, I suppose, in some ways torn up the rule book. So really interesting to hear some of your stories and to learn a little bit more about potentially, what is happening since COVID-19 and in the current situation we are in now. So really appreciate you giving up your time. And also
pleasure.
A better understanding of Supply Compass.
Well, thank you for letting me speak. It's been a pleasure. It's the first time in a virtual classroom like this.
Oh, well, hopefully we can invite you back at some stage. You've got lots of really messages coming in, lots of very interesting, some thank yous and brilliant. So yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And yeah, wish you on your journey.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Okay.